Hello everyone, Nathan P. Butler here, and this is the 6th episode in this viewer Q&A series that relatively recently relaunched. In any one of these videos, I'm always answering questions from the comments from the previous episode only. So since this is episode 6, I'm looking back at comments from the previous episode, which was episode number 5. I'm going to try to rapid fire here, get as many in here as I can. If you want questions answered in the next one, number 7, you'd put it in the comments for this one, number 6. I do not retroactively go back beyond that most recent one to gather questions, because usually that is plenty. I am recording this, by the way, on November 14th, in case anyone is wondering, well, I posted a comment. Why didn't mine get in there as a question? Well, if you posted after November 14th, I haven't seen it. Right? So make sure to put it underneath this one now that it is out if you are watching this. So just running through our questions here, we have from a user going by Clone Wars or at Clone Wars-IC3ZH. Hey, Nathan. Have you considered covering the Muppet Babies episode Baby Gonzo's Video Show, which is about the Muppet Babies recreating Star Wars? I know it was released on DVD in 2003/4. Actually, I have been thinking about that. I just don't have the knowledge yet of which releases to look for, so I haven't yet. But I will look that up. I'm assuming somewhere there's a wiki with that information that would let me know like how it's been released so that I can try to hunt that down, or at least like what season, what episode, that sort of thing. I actually am not a big fan of the Muppet Show episode, but I do have releases of that. The Muppet Babies episode, I loved back in the day. I actually had it as a recording with some other stuff, so I would rewatch it from time to time, just the Star Wars-based stuff. I don't remember a lot of it. I know Princess Pig, Gonzolo, and all that stuff. So that has put that back on the radar. At some point, I do need to look for that. Sometime when we haven't been whooped as bad as we have financially recently. It's been a rough last few months. But sometime in the future, like maybe summer era. I don't even know what it is. It's maybe after summer school when I got some freaking money. There you go. All right, next question comes from Mr. Wilson I Am, who asks, Nathan, what TV shows are you watching right now? What are your all-time favorite TV shows? And P.S. if you haven't seen the movie Final Girls from 2015, I think you may enjoy checking it out. I may check that out. Final Girl is a game that I am very much interested in. I am a play tester for it. I play the heck out of the stuff once it is released. Just did a video that it hasn't come out yet with a content overview for the newest film, A Rotten Harvest. So I may check that out. TV shows I'm watching right now. Boy, let's see. So I'm going to try to run my head through the different services so I don't miss a lot, but I'm sure I will. So Apple TV Plus, which I don't use for a lot of stuff, I watch The Morning Show and I watch The Silo. Prime Video, I'm a fan of The Boys and Gen V, and I do enjoy Legend of Vox Machina, and I'm about to start watching Mighty Nine. I don't know if they're going to be able to hold a candle to the original RPG campaigns from Critical Role, but, I do enjoy those. I do watch all the Marvel and Star Wars stuff on Disney+. I'm about to start watching The Pit that I'm really excited for on Max. I finished watching Peacemaker recently. It's kind of a smattering of stuff, really. And I watch a ton of just news because I'm a social studies nerd, so a lot of news junkie type stuff tends to be what I watch, throughout the day. I'm in the process of going back and trying to rewatch all of Power Rangers from the beginning because I only ever really saw a bunch of the Mighty Morphin stuff, and I love the comics, which I actually just finished a reread of. But I don't know how far I'm going to get into that. I'm still in the very, 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 very long first season of Mighty Morphin. As far as all-time favorite TV shows, Law & Order, Babylon 5, although Law & Order I've lost track of recently. But Law & Order, Babylon 5, Quantum Leap, Farscape, The West Wing. And if you really want a trippy time travel show that I really enjoyed, I'm not sure if I would consider it one of my favorites, but it's the one that I'm probably the most interested in going back and watching now that I've seen it once, 12 Monkeys. Not the film. Film was meh, but the TV series is great. And I'm sure I'm missing a ton of stuff, just that's what I'm thinking of off the top of my head here. Then a question from Christian Black of CJB Studios. I know this was briefly addressed in the 4th Q&A when I asked you a question about a bunch of Star Wars home video bootlegs. But what are your thoughts and opinions on the bootlegged version of Revenge of the Sith known as Backstroke of the West? From what I've read online, it is hilariously bad. Also, I don't know if other people have asked this question already, but what exactly got you into collecting multiple releases of Star Wars on home video? So as far as Backstroke of the West, I think I've seen it before. I've seen clips of it more recently. It's basically, my understanding is it's like a bad translation retranslated and that sort of thing, so you wind up with this really horrible dialogue, and people have done dubs of it in recent years. So it's just ridiculous, but it just shows kind of how language makes no sense when you translate from one to the other, especially when the translation at first isn't great, and then you translate that into something. Mildly amusing for a few minutes here. I don't know that I would watch the whole thing that way, but it's an amusing old bootleg if you ever get a chance to check it out. You can find clips of it on YouTube and whatnot. As for how I got into collecting Star Wars home video, the multiple release stuff, I will touch on this briefly. I know I've explained it before, and it is definitely something that's covered in the introduction to either edition, first or second edition of a saga on home video. In the case of second edition, it'd be in volume 1. But basically, I was someone who, if you look at the early videos on this channel, which are filmed in a different location, but similar setup, you would look behind me, and what you would see is a bunch of Star Wars books. I've been doing the Star Wars Timeline project, aka the Star Wars Timeline Gold, that I retired from a few years ago after 20 plus years. I've been doing that since 1996 for myself, 1997 in terms of what I was putting out for others. And in trying to make sure that I was following everything, reading everything, catching everything as it came out, I had amassed basically what was essentially a complete, to my eyes, Star Wars library, basically, of the books, the comics, in first format for the comics, not every printing, first format for the books and that sort of thing, not every printing, but all the different stories and whatnot that were out there. And I had gotten to the point where the hunt for old stuff and the collecting side was kind of boring now, because it was just picking up new releases as pre-orders. There wasn't a lot new to pick up at all. And so at that point, I was sort of picking up just, replacing stuff that I already had with signed editions and stuff like that. That was all I was really doing, which wasn't as fun. And I had already found an interest in Star Wars home video because I had what I thought was quite a few releases, which was really a drop in the bucket at the time. But I had several releases already, and I started to do videos on that as well around 2013. And over time, as my interest in that stuff continued to grow and my energy for collecting the books and stuff continued to dwindle, I did eventually sell off the book collection to make room for the home video collection, as we eventually saw. That's what the background is here. There's no books in there. I barely have any of the books anymore. But in that interim, as things were shifting a bit that direction, I had an interest in it just from the standpoint of seeing the development. It was something that there didn't seem to be a lot of guides out there for, and I always kind of feel the urge to fill a niche if there is that kind of niche to fill. Hence this show, hence Star Wars Home Video Year by Year, hence a saga on home video, and so on. But really what it came down to was, as I found myself interested in that and the interest in the other waning, which would eventually wane even more thanks to the reboot and all the controversy about creating any kind of content relating to legends and stuff like that. I kind of hit that point where it's like, okay, am I really going to collect this? I got a show started about this. Am I really going to hardcore collect this stuff? Which is around 2013. And I call it the Wile E. Coyote moment, right? You have a choice. You have gone off the cliff already. You look down, and now is when you realize, oh, okay, I've got a choice. I either scramble back to the cliff's edge and salvage my sanity right now, or I let myself take the plunge. And I chose to take the plunge. Again, not really realizing how deep it went and how much there was out there to collect. But it was really sort of a transition in my collecting from the books and the comics really being an exciting focus to the home video stuff, and then filling that niche, continuing to have that interest in that, grew over time to eventually eclipse the other stuff by far. Which was really probably not as quick an explanation as I thought that was going to be. Then we have one coming in from Matthew Burgett, who I hopefully am pronouncing correctly this time, who asks, do you have any interesting stories of seeing the Star Wars films in the theater, whether it's the special edition or the original trilogy or re-releases, the prequel trilogy or the Disney-era films? Any midnight showings or interesting encounters you had in the theater? So I know I've addressed this before, so I'll try again to be brief, but I'm sure I will not be. So I am told by my mother that I was taken to see The Empire Strikes Back when I was a baby. And I apologize to anyone who was in the theater, because babies in theaters don't mix very well, but I don't remember that. I have what I think are vague memories of seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters in '83, but because of what I visualize when I see that, I wonder if I am conflating and sort of creating those memories based on the trading cards I had at the time and the images on those. What I do remember well is going to see the special editions. I was in high school at the time that the special editions were released. That would have been, I guess, my junior year of high school. And I was typically someone who would go to school every single day. In fact, I went to school every single day because there was a reward for it, where if you had perfect attendance, every great once in a while, you got to take a school trip by bus to the local mall to hang out for a big part of the day. That was just what we did as a reward. Kind of weird. Very 90s. But I finally decided I don't need the trip to the mall. I can go to the mall whenever I want, because when the special editions came out, my best friend at the time and I, sort of like a brother to me now, he and I decided we were both going to basically have our parents call us out and whatnot, so that we could go eat lunch and go see the early matinee showing of that Star Wars special edition at the time. At the time, you really didn't see a lot of midnight releases in my hometown, or like preview showings the night before. It was basically the first time to go would be around like 1 o'clock or so on the day of release. So we went to see it. All three of them. We went to eat usually some Chinese food, and then went to that. So there was that. And then in 99, the theater that we went to used to be called Stadium 16. Now it's AMC 16 in my hometown. That was basically around the time it was opening. So they hadn't even opened for movies yet, and we were able to do pre-orders of tickets for the initial showings of Phantom Menace. And we bought tickets for the entire day. Every showing went as a big group, where the group sort of changed each time based on who was like, screw it, I'm out, I'm going to go lay down. So that was kind of a fun event type of thing. And then also around that time, I was able to kind of return the favor to my mother from my childhood and take her to go see Phantom Menace. So taking her to see the new Star Wars film as she used to take me. By the time of Attack of the Clones, it was almost sort of a bittersweet thing, because Attack of the Clones came out right after I graduated from college, right before I moved away to Georgia years ago, back in 2002. So it was kind of a last chance for all the friends to hang out and go see a midnight showing before I would be leaving. Let's see. And then we have 2005, Revenge of the Sith, the first one in Georgia. And then you get to the Disney era stuff, and the Disney era stuff has really just sort of been jockeying around and figuring out being able to go. So for the first films, it was going to see it at the initial, whatever the earliest showing is, usually the night before. Me and my wife going to see the films. That was fun. I don't have a lot of clear memories of a lot of stuff other than just going and like just the fun of being able to sit there in the theater and see it primarily in 3D. But I do remember, like, there's a picture of me with my Darth Maul Celebration 1 jacket, my Rogue One hat, going to see The Last Jedi with our new Kia Soul that from the back looks like the face of Captain Phasma's helmet, that kind of thing. But of course, as you get to the latter era, then we have a child, and then it's the logistics of being able to try to like go see The Rise of Skywalker at that showing. Who's going to watch him? That kind of thing. Because certainly too young at that point. So, you know, like, just everybody kind of remembers certain things about them. I don't know that any of them were, you know, spectacular, amazing things, but just kind of like milestones within fandom, things that I do remember. I wonder how it's going to work out when Mandalorian and Grogu comes out. Am I going to see it by myself while she's watching our son, and then vice versa? Or maybe she sees it with her dad, because they see a lot of movies together and I barely ever go to the theater anymore. Do we have somebody watch him and we go together to go see it? Do we try taking him? This is a child who has never been to a movie theater before. He is autistic. I don't know how he would handle the sensation stuff, or being able to sit for that long watching a film when he usually doesn't have an interest in live action as much. So I don't know. I don't know how that's actually going to wind up working out, but it'll be just another of those milestone type moments. There's not enough Star Wars films being released for them to all get mixed together, I guess, for me yet. And then 3 questions to round us out from James Lawner, who asks, first, number 1, what are your thoughts on graphic novelizations of Star Wars projects? Can they be as good as the stuff they're based on? Whether it's graphic novelizations of movies or novels, especially novels like with Dark Horse's adaptation of the original Thrawn trilogy. I generally prefer the original source material to the adaptations, and that is kind of across the board. I think really the only time we've ever seen an adaptation that really lived up to the original source material in a big way, in fact overcame it, was Matthew Stover's novelization of Revenge of the Sith. I don't know that I would ever say that any of the Star Wars adaptations in comic form for any movies or anything else really for that matter, even the recent Thrawn novel, really hold up to the source material. It's cool to see because it's great to get new visuals to put in your head as you're rereading or reading the book for the first time, but I don't know that there's really anything beyond that really gives me that much more. I love the art in some of them. Jan Duursema, the first time I ever saw her art, I think outside of the Darth Maul comic series, actually was in one of the film adaptations. But for the most part, I feel like the film adaptations are pretty basic stuff most of the time, no matter what format it's in. And honestly, sometimes adaptations can throw off your visualization of other stuff. Like, maybe not the comics, but I take like the Wheel of Time that I read through a couple of years ago in its entirety. When I try to read Wheel of Time stuff, I don't want to be picturing the characters from the show because there's such an age difference and some of the characterization differences and whatnot to have a different visual look and feel for the show that I want to separate my brain out between the adaptation and the source material if I'm just checking out the source material. Number 2, in what order have you shown the Star Wars movies to your child? You guys want some blasphemy? I haven't. He couldn't care less about live action most of the time unless it's Anderson Cooper, oddly, or hockey, or Power Rangers. He doesn't care for live action. So I've tried to get him to watch some Star Wars animated stuff. He's taken a mild interest in a little bit of Clone Wars and Rebels. Doesn't really seem to care that much at this point. When he was super little, I would have Star Wars on, and he'd just kind of like see the stuff on the screen, but this is like way when he's like super, super young. He just hasn't gotten into it. What order would I introduce it to him in? Given his interest, I would probably introduce him to the animated stuff first, then live action, and then to whichever trilogy, kind of depending on where his interest lies, right? Like if he's a big Clone Wars watcher, but not as much into Rebels, I'd probably start him on the prequels. If he's more into Rebels than he is into Clone Wars, I'd probably start him with the original trilogy. But at this point, he just doesn't really have the interest or the patience for it, so we really haven't. I'm stoked at this point that he's actually getting interested in some of the animated Disney films because of the music aspect of it. He generally doesn't tend to go for that sort of thing. And then number 3, the last question of this one, which country had the best Star Wars releases? So I'm going to say probably the United States in general in terms of just the wide variety of stuff that we got. But it's not that in every case ours was superior, it's just by sheer volume, breadth and scope of what we got. I think early on especially, usually the US got some of the best stuff, although I would say Japan surpassed us in some instances like, say, Laserdisc. But you get to the modern era, and I think ours is pretty wide in scope, but shallow in depth to some degree. So I think that in more modern releases, I think the best releases are tending to be things that come out of usually Japan a lot of times. I would probably say beyond Japan, I'd probably say China because of the one-click boxes and whatnot from Blue fans. The problem there, of course, being that there is a lot of redundancy to it, even though they're fancy and cool, and they only lasted for 3 of the recent 5 films. I think that there are times when the UK does beat the United States. It depends on the product line that they're getting. And a lot of times the European market bests the American market, not in a one-to-one comparison, but in instances in which they have something we don't have at all, like those trilogy sets from a few years ago that don't exist in the United States, like all of those steelbooks that they got in Europe that we didn't get over here for all 11 live action films. So it kind of depends on how you're looking at it. US is pretty solid as a base over the entire stretch of the lifespan. If you want fancy but brief, China. If you want somewhat fancy but expensive, Japan. I think the UK, relatively light earlier, especially on things like Laserdisc, but the UK really has held its own in the last few years in terms of providing things that we don't have. And a lot of times what's in the UK reflects across Europe. So that may be kind of an answer that is a non-answer, but I really think that it's a nuanced kind of question. You know, what is best? What era are we looking at? Are we comparing specific products that had analogs or didn't? That sort of thing. But that's why I collect more broadly than just the US now. You know, the stuff across the pond became intriguing to me, and slowly but surely I've been adding it. And to me, a lot of the fun in collecting stuff internationally isn't just those items for the items themselves, it's the comparison purposes, right? Being able to look at the Black Border releases from the US and from the UK and from Australia and how those differed along the way. Looking at the label differences, for instance, for certain discs out of China versus the US, or looking at different product formats that didn't exist anywhere else, like the big sleeve editions in the UK versus what did we have here? Was there an equivalent? There wasn't. All that kind of stuff. I find that stuff endlessly fascinating, and part of why I've stayed hooked on this particular form of collecting and this little corner of Star Wars fandom for as long as I have. And yes, I did have to just get my work computer to light back up again because the light dimmed. Although now it looks like I'm on Tatooine because the background is all tan. Thank you, Windows 11, for random freaking pictures. In any event, that wraps up the questions for this one. Again, if you would like to have questions answered in the next one, which is number 7, whenever that may happen, put them in the comments of this episode here, and I'll be sure to take a look at those and use some or all when the time comes for number 7. For now, I hope if you're in the US, if I don't put out another of these before Thanksgiving, please have a good Thanksgiving, safe Thanksgiving as well. I know travel is kind of crazy right now, but hopefully you can enjoy spending some time with family, friends, relaxing, or just watching other people argue with their families. Whichever floats your boat. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next Q&A.